Righto, today we're going to talk tackle, specifically tuna lures and smaller tuna lures. So I've had a few questions about some of the lures that I use for casting at tuna this season, over the summer down here in Victor Harbor in South Australia. So I thought I'd run you through some of the lures that worked really well for me this season, and match it up to some of the footage to show you also the techniques that I use. So these are the lures that I'm going to run you through. I'll break them down into different groups and talk you through each one now. So the first group, or the first style of lure that I'd like to talk about, is the simple old metal slug. Very effective for us this season, and very cost effective as well. You know, everyone's out there buying these flash lures to cast at tuna, but you can pick up a silver metal slug for, you know, $5 to $10. The same ones that you're going to throw for your salmon or you know, your tailor on the East Coast. But yeah, it really doesn't have to be expensive or too flash. I've got a couple of examples here. One is fairly new because it's actually a replacement to one that I lost to a shark, and one you can see is quite beaten up. So these two, well, this one specifically, this has actually got a lighter gauge hook on it at the moment, ready for salmon. And this one's a replacement for one that really worked well for us this season. As you can see, they're both very simple lures, and you can use them quite effectively a number of different ways. We found they're really effective when the tuna are working bait on the surface or just below the surface and they're really worked up. You could cast these lures a long way, and then you could either rip them across the top or let them sink, and as they sink, they're shimmying down through the bait, and then work them again, let them sink, and at some stage the tuna is definitely going to pile onto them. I'll show you some of the footage now of us utilizing these lures. I've got to get right on them. Yeah, got him on. Got him on. Oh, they're right into that bait ball too. They're not going anywhere for a little bit. You see the bait ball? It's thick as. Got him! Yoo-hoo-hoo! Right, I'm gonna have to follow him. Stay tight. Good? Yeah. Nice. So yeah, the old metal slug works a treat. One thing I would say is always upgrade your split rings and single hooks. Definitely prefer the single hooks on the smaller metal slugs. If you go the bigger trebles or the heavier trebles, it definitely affects the way they work. Plus, I think you get a better hookup ratio with your singles. And the tuna releases better if they're on the single hook rather than on the treble, if you are going to release them. So that's the metal slug. Very effective and cost efficient as well. Yeah, so it's not going to cost you a fortune if you're starting out. The other thing I should have mentioned with those metal slugs is you would have noticed they're very small. So better cast out on your lighter gear, sort of snapper gear. Have a lot of fun on those, but yeah, definitely your lighter gear for them. The next ones we're going to have a chat about are stick baits. Again, we're talking smaller stick baits, 10 to 12 centimeters. I'm going to show you the ones that we used effectively this season, and we'll have a chat about those as well. So got a couple of different styles here. This one's a bit beaten up. This one's actually new. I got him recently and can't wait to get him wet. These two are the same basically, but one's slightly longer and therefore a little bit heavier. So the top two are your Rapala X-Wrap long cast shallow stick baits. These two are actually a little bit flasher. There's some Japanese made lures, so I think the brand is actually Melon Yar or something or other like that, but I picked those up while I was in southeast Queensland, specifically for targeting longtail tuna and kingfish, but they've been really effective on the southern blues for me as well. So these two are a little bit heavier. So those two Melonia lures, stick baits, are a little bit heavier than the Rapala X Wraps, but both very effective. So I found that with the heavier lures, they gave me an opportunity for the longer casts, and they also gave me a little bit faster sink. And when they're sinking, again, similar to the metal slug, they're sort of shimmying down through the water column, and quite often they'll get a bite on the sink. Sometimes you can sort of work them and you might get the bite on when the lure's moving, but quite often with the tuna we found, we got those bites on the sink. So I'll cut some footage now of utilizing these stick baits to good effect, once again on the smaller tuna. So I hope you're seeing all this. This is pretty cool. Oh, got him that time. Ah, yep, got him that time. Yep. I'm pretty sure he jumped over a dolphin to get at this. Phew. How good. He's gonna go nuts in a minute. Here we go. Oh yeah. Not a bad little fish. And this is why I love center consoles. Round we go. Sweet as, bro. So the time where they were effective was very similar to the time when the metal slugs were effective. It's just that when I was fishing the metal slugs, you can only sort of, the smaller ones, you can only really get them out on the lighter gear, which is fun and good fun. But if I generally find if I want to keep a fish, I want to get it in a bit quicker. So I'm using slightly heavier gear. And that's when I'll switch to the longer and heavier stick baits. I'll get those out on the heavier gear, and I'll be able to get those smaller fish in a lot quicker, get them bled, get them on ice, and they make for much better eating quality. So the next one I want to have a talk about is actually a casting minnow. And this one is something that was fairly new to us this season. We'd never really fished with casting minnows. We'd trolled minnows before and fished plenty of stick baits and surface lures and that sort of thing in the past, but we'd never really, trialed a casting minnow. On a couple of our trips, we noticed that quite often the tuna was staying a bit deeper, and that got us thinking about these casting minnows. This one's a Rapala again. Had some good success with that. Rapala long cast 12, so again a smaller lure, but this was super effective for us. So much so that that particular lure only lasted one afternoon, but it got absolutely demolished. Between the two of us, I think we caught up to 10 or 12 fish off the one lure. We were literally just taking it in turns. And I'll show you some footage and have a chat afterwards about where we found this lure to really come into its own. So check this out. That's the one I had on before, so. Yep. Keep us in gear. Oh, got him. Yep, right at the boat. Oh, nice. Woo-hoo-hoo. Here we go. He's going to go nuts. Oh, yep. We might have put him down then. Oh, out the back. Oh. Oh. Yep. Yep. Got him. Yep. You can probably get that popper rod up on top. So yeah, where that lure really came into effect was when we knew the tuna were there, but they were traveling. They were either chasing bait or traveling to the next bait school. And we could sort of get a gauge on the traveling fish, judging the birds and the bird activity sort of following the fish. The birds can see the fish as the tuna were traveling along. We couldn't always see them, but we knew they were there, and we were able to sort of travel along with the tuna. And yeah, that lure was really effective because it allowed us still to get a fairly long cast in, but it was working subsurface. And again, interestingly, or potentially not interestingly for some people that already knew, but a lot of our bites off of that lure actually came on the paws. You know, you would think that most of your tuna fishing is done high speed. Well, we found a lot of our bites came on the paws, and that was really interesting to us. So that lure was really successful, and I'll definitely be getting a few more of those ready for summer. So the last style of lure that I'm gonna have a quick chat about for casting at tuna is actually a jig. And whilst I did have the jigs on board ready to jig up tuna if they were ever, or if we ever found them staying down a bit deep, we never really came across that scenario this season. There was just so much surface action, but I really found the jigs were useful for getting that second hook up. So if you've got two people on board, like we did quite often, one casting up the front, you know, gets hooked up or doesn't, the skipper quite often, once they've got the angler onto the fish or in the right area, you can grab the jig rod or another rod that's set up and throw a little cast in if the tuna school is coming right at you. And quite often we found that once we'd position the boat, the tuna would just be coming straight at us, and that's where these lures came into their own. So I'll show you what I've pulled out for you. As you can see, this one's a bit beat up, and this one's not quite as beat up, but these were ones that were quite successful for us. Again, smaller sort of lures, about the size of your finger. You'll probably go smaller on the jigs, but these are you know, smaller lures, 50, 60, 40 grams. These ones are 60. Really effective for those, you know, short little casts off the side of the boat, and also good to have hooked up, or good to have rigged up ready for if you do come across tuna that are holding down a bit deeper, and they might have worked bait into a ball a little bit deeper, or they're just sitting a bit deeper. You can drop your jig down on them and potentially get a bite out of them when no one else is catching. So definitely good to have some jigs on board and have them rigged up and ready. So I'll flick to some footage of where I used the jigs to success. So stand by for that. Oh, I'm gonna go for a double here. You all right? Let me know if you need me to drive or anything. Where are they?
Right in front of us.
Oh, yep, they're on it. They're on it. Oh, yep, got him. No, dropped him. Yep, got him. Doubles. Oh, look at the bait. Yes. Oh shit. You good? Oh, smoking, man. Alright, so that wraps up that little tackle talk. Like I said, you really don't have to spend a heap of money to get started with casting at tuna, or for casting at tuna. It's good to have a bit of variety on board. Some smaller lures, definitely. You know, I can't count the number of times that I saw blokes or saw others, you know, throwing some bigger lures at tuna that were worked up, and there's, you know, tuna everywhere. But it's not until you switch to those smaller lures that you can really start getting some numbers, especially when the fish or when the tuna are working that small bait, which we found this year. They're into that white bait in close. Then unless you have those smaller options on board, you're going to struggle to get the same number of bites. So yeah, it's definitely worth having a variety. And yeah, you definitely also want to be upgrading your split rings and hooks, because generally speaking, not always, generally speaking, the split rings and hooks that come with your lures just aren't, they might be right for that 8 and 12 kilo fish, but then when that 20, 22, 25 kilo fish jumps on and you're putting a bit of pressure on, you'll straighten out those hooks or bust one of your split rings. So yeah, I'm starting to think about those big barrels now. There's some reports of good fish coming from Port Mac in South Australia and further down the coast. So I'm starting to put away the light gear and dust off the heavy gear. But while the summer's still fresh in my mind, I thought I'd run you through some of those lures and some of the techniques that we used as well. So hopefully we get a chance to get after those barrels and we can, bring you some cool footage of the 100 kilo tuna that I've been dreaming about. So, alrighto, until then, cheers.